Hello to all and welcome to my third video. In this video, I'm going to do a bit of time traveling and go back to the period that created the preconditions for the writing of the book. And then I'm going to carry on with the reading some extracts from the book. So I'm 35 now, and I started the writing process when I was in my early 20s, 21. So it's a long time ago, and a lot has changed, and I've grown as a person. So it's sometimes hard to connect or even really relate to the person I was when I started writing. The anger, the pain, the indignation I felt, my anger at society, my anger at the world, and just my all-consuming frustration. And I believe a lot of what led to that was, of course, as I said in my earlier videos, being born in a post-colonial country and having the propensity, as I did, to be a questioner and a thinker. I've always thought, always contemplated the big issues, the big questions. But when I moved to England, that was a catalyst in many ways, because I did find myself all of a sudden in a foreign environment. And having grown up in Zimbabwe, which, as I've already stated, was racially divided, it was a culture shock, a massive culture shock. The white people in Zimbabwe are colonial whites in many ways, so their outlook was still very much consistent with the ideas that would have pervaded through the colonial period. And I can give an anecdote actually that was a stiff reminder of that when I went back to Zimbabwe recently, about 2018, and I was in a restaurant coming from the toilet, and there was a man behind the counter at the bar, a white man, and I just safely assumed he was one of the people who works there. And I said to him, "Could you please bring a glass of water to the table for us?" The anger on his face was immeasurable, and he quite sternly told me that he would get one of the workers to bring the water. And I thought to myself, welcome back to Zimbabwe. Of course, the relationships between the whites and different ethnic groups in Western countries are closer linked, because I suppose society is a bit fairer in many ways, ironically. But in many respects, the status quo of the past still exists in many parts of Africa. And so it was having or being born in a country like that, where people were that divided and the ideas of white supremacy were firmly rooted. It really created the preconditions for my thinking. But it all intensified in the period between 18, 19, 20, and I found myself down a rabbit hole of constantly researching and looking into the brutal aspects of history as far as race is concerned. And I'd read about things like the Tulsa, Oklahoma bombings, where a successful community of blacks was attacked by a mob of angry whites and razed to the ground, and people killed and murdered. And what I struggled with the most was the injustice of it all, in that people got away with it and there was no way to defend yourself. or at the very least, the state wouldn't protect you. And I researched things like the brutal, brutal regime of King Leopold of Belgium in the Congo in his quest for rubber, and how he decimated millions, chopping off people's hands, children, women, to fulfill the quotas of rubber. And I was finding it extremely difficult to reconcile with life the murder of Emmett Till in America, which in many ways was the George Floyd moment of their time, and how these people were getting away with it in quite similar ways that some of the issues that are being seen in America, where the police or someone like George Zimmerman can get away with cold-blooded murder. And when you do the history around someone like James Marion Sims, who is the so-called father of modern gynecology, who perfected his techniques on black female slaves, operating on them without anesthetics or pain relief, because they could take it, for want of a better word, is what he said. And the people who defend people like him by saying you can only judge a man like that in their time, the same thing you hear said about someone like Winston Churchill. And that irks me to no end, because I always ask, at what point in time is it right to abuse people? Is it in the Stone Age? The question I ask these defenders is, tell me a point in history where we can go and is, for example, right to rape a woman. The Stone Age, 1980, 1920. What's the cutoff point? Where does morality start? So that's an argument that does frustrate me when people say you should judge, the men should be judged because they were men of their time. And I find that to be very unfortunate. And you hear that said by people in very high places defending a brutal history. When I did research on South African farmers and the way they treated their laborers, and there's a quite painful picture of a Rhodesian army soldier, Graham Bailey, which won the Pulitzer Prize of 1978, which depicts him having brutally beaten a man, Moffat Ngube, tortured him to death. I couldn't deal with it. It was too much for me. Things like this Tuskegee syphilis trials, where they experimented on black people without their consent to see the effects of syphilis untreated. And this was the American Medical Association. And sometimes people get surprised why black people find it hard to trust the institutions, the police, because in many ways it was these institutions of power, arms of the state, that were responsible for the brutality. And I found myself asking, where's God in all of this? It was a truly dark time. It was a truly difficult time. It was a truly testing time. And I always think to myself, if I hadn't discovered writing, I don't know what would have become of me. So I don't know if that really illustrates the preconditions that led to the writing of the book. I was in a desperate state, trying to figure out life, trying to understand its injustice, its unfairness, but more importantly, trying to figure out, well, if we're all good, then how come all this evil? And because I was trained to observe through a racial lens, the question was, how then can white people be good when they're meting out all this evil? And in many ways, they held the Bible and pontificated about their civilization. And yet they seemed to be being as brutal as can be. That's the world I lived in. That's the world I saw. But I'm happy to say I came through it. And the result was, as I've already expressed, this book, these books. And this was actually, it's a rewriting of the original book, which was called The Dichotic Dilemma, The Ramblings of a Social Commentator. But having reread that recently, I'd say that I wasn't quite mature enough when I wrote that first book, and I had to let it go. And I'm taking it off Amazon. But the later versions are a more accurate representation of my thinking and where my inquiry has led to ultimately. So I'll carry on with the reading, and I'll share with this you today. And I hope that synopsis of the period that led to the writing resonates and makes sense. And in many ways, I'm thankful because it could have ended badly, suffice it to say. So I was spared because I was spared from living in a hate-filled world, an angry world. And through the writing and the catharsis, I see and I saw the potential for a better world. So really my literature is about bridging gaps. And so I'll carry on. All things can reach a crescendo, and the peak of my angst resulted in an intrinsic need to expel my frustrations, thoughts and feelings, for they raked my consciousness near enough every waking minute. Writing became the medium. What is the purpose of life was the cry. Hence, a spontaneous process of catharsis occurred, and I began to write down and purge all my thoughts and feelings, a process which filled many notebooks with expressions which were at times poetic, a stream of consciousness, and mostly just an expression of political, social, and philosophical ideas. Consequently, the next natural instinct was to transfer these ideas into another medium, which then resulted in the writing of this book. At 21 years of age, yes, I had written a book. However, it was the strangest sensation whereby, after completing the book and getting it published, I almost immediately became disillusioned with everything I had written. The clarity I had acquired from cleansing my mind of my thoughts allowed me to then see a brand new world I'd never seen before. Hence, engraved in me became a strong sense of a lack of confidence in what I had written, consequently, a lack of confidence in myself. In the process of writing the book, I'd felt inspired, but once it had been written, and with a blank slate, I felt as though I knew nothing. As ever, life continued. One needs money in this life, so I completed my university education and started a career in the health service. I lost a love that at one stage had seemed so vivid and powerful, and experienced all the heartbreak and pain that such a thing can cause. However, many other things stayed the same, and some other things have begun. Through it all, however, I got a chance to learn the necessity of pain. Hence, in time again, the lessons I have learned, my experiences, observations, and perceptions of life have led me to sit down and write in an effort to address my disillusionment and hopefully provide a positive perspective on human existence. Reaching this stage has been aided by the fact that I've been living in England now for over a decade, and on that basis, I've been living in the West for more than a decade. I've seen now life, I've seen life now from a different perspective, a Western perspective. I've walked, talked, and laughed now amongst people that seemed so separate and alien to me in my younger days. I'm now aware of their humanity, as I was aware of the humanity of the Africans I'd grown up amongst. Humanity in its variant forms and manifestations. The world and life now has a new meaning. Therefore, it is on this basis that I now understand my sense of disillusionment when I initially wrote the book earlier on in my life. I would argue that it was a subconscious realization that perhaps the ideas I had proposed were underdeveloped, preliminary, and potentially poorly structured. Hence, now I have the confidence to readdress these issues in a more structured way, with a better understanding of the ideas I had accidentally come across as I was initially writing the book. For 5 years now, I have not revisited the book to truly know its contents, as I did not read it once I had written it. All I know is that I have a sense of needing to bring order to an unfinished work, and in many ways feel grateful to have the opportunity to do so for whatever it might be worth. So it shall again be a voyage of discovery as I look to connect with the young man I was then and try and amalgamate his ideas with a newfound perspective. The format of the book sees me write down the poems, expressions, or ideas that I expelled into my notebooks. Then following that, I try to provide an extrapolation into the hidden meaning of each of the poems or expressions. In the process, trying to discuss ideas and creating a platform for understanding my angst and also providing a perspective into human existence. So, as I've said already, it's a journey. It's a voyage of discovery, and it's a catharsis and it's self-expression. And I hope that with this video, one can understand, as I've stated already, the preconditions that led to the writing of the book. So I'll say thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode, where we will truly get stuck in to the reading of the book. I'll see you then. Thank you.